Between 1929 and 1933, roughly 25% of all Americans lost their jobs, over 9,000 banks collapsed, and entire nations fell into economic ruin from a financial disaster that spread like wildfire across continents. The crash was swift and merciless, but for those caught in its grip, life somehow continued in the shadow of economic devastation. Here's what life was really like during the Great Depression. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, tonight it's the Great Depression, but before we go anywhere, get comfortable. Seriously. Adjust those pillows. Pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. Your eyes snap open to darkness. The room is ice cold. October in New York, 1929, and coal for heating is already being rationed in your building. Your stomach growls painfully, not like the mild hunger when you skip lunch. This is day 3 without a proper meal hunger, the kind that makes your body literally start to consume itself. You're not sleeping on the street, not yet, but the mattress beneath you is thin and lumpy, nothing like your comfortable bed right now. Your apartment is small, but it's shelter. For how much longer though? That's the question keeping you up at night. 3 days ago you had a decent job at a factory. 3 days ago you had savings. 3 days ago the stock market was riding high and America was prosperous. Then came Black Thursday. The thing about economic disasters is they happen in slow motion and all at once. It's like watching a train wreck from inside the train. For years, people had been pouring money into stocks, borrowing cash to buy more stocks, using those stocks as collateral to borrow even more. It was basically a nationwide pyramid scheme, and on October 24th, 1929, the whole thing came crashing down. Extra, extra. The paperboy's voice cuts through the morning fog as you walk to the employment office. Stock market collapses, worst crash in history. You remember yesterday's scenes outside the New York Stock Exchange, men in expensive suits with blank expressions. The wealthy jumping from buildings isn't just a myth, it actually happened. Not in the numbers people imagine, but enough that ambulance crews were kept busy scraping the remains of once wealthy brokers off the pavement. Did you hear about George? One man whispers to another in the growing unemployment line. Lost everything. His wife found him in the garage with the car running. At least he had a car, the other man replies. The unemployment office is chaos. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, all fighting for the same few jobs. The man behind the counter looks exhausted, his eyes bloodshot. Nothing today, he tells you without looking up. Try again tomorrow. But tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after that. Wait, I need you to understand what this actually felt like. This wasn't just a bad day in the stock market. This was the entire economic system of the United States, the richest country on earth, completely collapsing. Imagine every financial certainty in your life vanishing overnight. The market will recover, the newspapers say. President Herbert Hoover makes reassuring statements. Prosperity is just around the corner, but you're not stupid. You can see the truth with your own eyes. On your way home, you pass a bank. There's a crowd outside, growing larger by the minute. People pounding on the locked doors, some crying, others shouting. A bank run. When people lose faith in banks, they all rush to withdraw their money at once. But here's the thing about banks in 1929. They don't keep all your money on hand. They lend it out. So when everyone wants their cash at the same time, the bank fails. They can't just keep our money, a woman screams, her face red with anger. That's my life savings in there. But they can, and they did. Between 1930 and 1933, nearly half of all American banks failed. If your money was in one of them, it was just gone. No FDIC insurance, no government bailout, just gone. You know what's really wild? Before the crash, the economy seemed unstoppable. The roaring 20s were exactly that. Roaring with excess, jazz, illegal booze during Prohibition, and money that seemed to multiply like magic in the stock market. 10 grand, your neighbour had boasted last month. Started with just $500 last year. The market only goes up, friend. Only goes up. He jumped from his 10th floor apartment 2 days after the crash. By evening, you're back in your apartment, counting the money you have left. $6.17. The rent is due in a week. $5. That leaves $1 and change for food to last, well, until you find work, whenever that might be. You think about your parents back in Chicago. Could you move back home? The thought makes your stomach twist with shame. 30 years old and crawling back to your parents, but shame doesn't fill an empty stomach. On the street below, a commotion draws you to the window. A family is being evicted, their furniture, clothes and personal belongings thrown carelessly onto the sidewalk. The mother is crying, clutching a baby to her chest. The father stands motionless, his expression blank with shock. 2 small children cling to their mother's skirt, confused and frightened. This scene is playing out all across America. By 1932, thousands of families will be evicted every day in major cities. The next morning, you join what people are starting to call a bread line. Hundreds of people waiting for free soup and a piece of bread from a charity kitchen. The line stretches around the block. You take your place at the end, swallowing your pride. This is survival now. "First time?" asks the man in front of you, not unkindly. You nod. "You'll get used to it," he says. "Was a bank manager myself before all this. Now look at me." He gestures to his threadbare coat and worn shoes. That's the thing about the Depression that's hard to understand now. It wasn't just the poor who suffered. The middle class was decimated. People who thought they were secure, professionals, managers, skilled workers, suddenly found themselves destitute. The thing is, the former bank manager continues, nobody's immune. I had customers, millionaires on paper, who lost everything in a day. One fella came in to withdraw $1 million. By the time we closed that afternoon, his stocks weren't worth the paper they were printed on. The soup, when you finally get it after 3 hours of waiting, is thin and flavourless. The bread is stale, but it's food. You wolf it down, trying not to think about when you'll eat again. Back in your apartment, you turn on the radio, one luxury you've maintained. President Hoover is speaking, assuring the nation that the economy is fundamentally sound, that prosperity will return. "He's full of shit," says your neighbour through the thin wall. "Sorry for the language," he adds, probably remembering your shared wall. "No, you're right," you call back. This casual conversation through the wall has become your main social interaction. "Got any coffee?" he asks. "Just the grounds from yesterday, already used them twice." "Bring 'em over, I'll show you how to get a third cup out of them." And this is how people survived. Sharing, stretching, making do. Coffee grounds used multiple times. Soup made from ketchup and hot water. Clothing mended and remended until the original fabric was more patch than garment. The crazy part, the stores were full of food. The problem wasn't supply. It was that people had no money to buy anything. Farmers were destroying crops because prices had fallen so low it wasn't worth bringing them to market, while people in cities were starving. In Iowa, farmers poured milk onto highways rather than sell it for pennies. In California, oranges rotted in vast piles while children in New York developed diseases from malnutrition. It's one of history's cruelest ironies, starvation amidst plenty. The next day brings rumours that the stock market is recovering. People are hopeful again. Maybe this will all blow over quickly. Maybe Hoover is right about prosperity being just around the corner. You hear of a factory across town that might be hiring. You spend your precious pennies on a trolley fare, only to find hundreds of men already waiting when you arrive. Some have been there since dawn. They're taking applications, one man tells you, but they've got 20 spots and there must be 500 of us here. You wait anyway. What choice do you have? By noon, a factory foreman comes out. No more jobs today, he shouts. Try again next week. The crowd's disappointment is palpable, a wave of despair washing over hundreds of faces. Men turn away, shoulders slumped, shuffling back to wherever they came from. But one man doesn't move. That's it? He shouts. We wait all morning and that's it? The foreman ignores him, turning to go back inside. My kids are hungry, the man screams, his voice breaking. My kids haven't eaten in 2 days. Other men join in now, their voices rising in anger and desperation. For a moment, it feels like the crowd might rush the factory gates. There's a dangerous energy building, the kind that precedes violence. You back away. You've heard about riots breaking out in other cities, hungry, desperate people looting grocery stores and warehouses. You don't want to be part of that, but you understand it now. Hunger does things to people. It strips away civilization, reduces humans to their most basic instincts. Your own empty stomach has been teaching you this lesson. You find yourself walking past neighbourhoods you'd never normally enter, the wealthy areas, the homes with lights still on, cars still in driveways, smoke still curling from chimneys, the people who survived the crash or even profited from it, buying stocks at rock-bottom prices. The divide between rich and poor existed before the crash, but now it's a canyon, gaping and impossible to ignore. Here's something wild about economic depressions. They're not equal opportunity disasters. While millions were plunged into poverty, others barely noticed. The truly wealthy, old money, not the nouveau riche who gambled everything on stocks, continued much as before. Their servants might have accepted lower wages, their portfolios might have taken a hit, but they weren't standing in bread lines. Walking back to your apartment, you pass a Hooverville, one of the shanty towns springing up in cities across America, named mockingly after the president who seemed unable or unwilling to address the crisis. Makeshift shelters cobbled together from scrap wood, cardboard, tin sheets, whatever people could find. Entire families living in conditions you wouldn't keep animals in. You wonder how many of those people had normal lives just weeks ago. 2 children play in the dirt outside one of the shacks, using sticks and rocks as toys. They're thin, their clothes dirty and too small, but they're laughing. Children adapt. Somehow they find joy even in the darkest circumstances. The next morning brings news that reverberates through the city like a thunderclap. The stock market, which had been recovering slightly, has crashed again. Any hope of a quick resolution to the crisis vanishes. You think about that neighbour who boasted of his market gains, the one who jumped. You understand him better now. A week passes, your rent comes due. The landlord, a man named Gianelli, who's always been fair in the past, knocks on your door. I know things are tough, he says, not meeting your eyes. But I got the bank breathing down my neck. If I don't collect, I lose the building. You hand over your $5, leaving yourself with just over $1 for how long? You don't know. Thanks, he says, pocketing the money. Then, unexpectedly, he pulls out a paper bag. My wife made extra stew, said to give it to you. The simple kindness brings tears to your eyes. You're too choked up to speak, so you just nod your thanks. That night, as you savour each bite of the stew, actual meat, vegetables, flavour, you listen to the radio. The news is spreading beyond America now. The economic disaster isn't contained. It's jumping borders, crossing oceans. In Germany, already struggling under the weight of war reparations from the Treaty of Versailles, banks are failing. In Britain, unemployment is soaring. The global economy is interconnected in ways people barely understood until it all began to unravel. You think about your job at the factory, making parts that were shipped overseas. The factory closed because orders dried up. Those orders dried up because companies in other countries were failing. Those companies were failing because their customers had no money. And round it goes, a perfect circle of economic destruction. The stew is gone too quickly. You use bread to wipe the bowl clean, not wasting a drop. Then you lie back on your bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow will bring. Outside, the city that never sleeps has taken on a different rhythm. Not the frenetic energy of prosperity, but the restless stirring of worry, of hunger, of fear. In just a few short weeks, the world has changed completely, and the depression is only just beginning. What's happening in America is just the first tremor. The economic earthquake will soon shake the entire world, toppling governments, birthing extremist movements, redrawing the map of global power. In Germany, a political party that garnered only 2.6% of the vote in 1928 will soon find fertile ground for their message among the unemployed and desperate. Their leader, a failed artist with a talent for channeling anger, will rise on the tide of economic misery. In Britain, the pound sterling, once the world's most stable currency, will be forced off the gold standard, a humiliation for a nation that prided itself on financial strength. In Japan, military leaders will point to the economic crisis as proof that their nation must expand, must secure resources and markets by force if necessary. But all of that is still to come. For now, in late 1929, there is just the dawning realization that the prosperity of the Roaring Twenties was built on sand. The party is over, the bill has come due, and ordinary people, millions upon millions of them, are the ones who will pay it. As you drift towards sleep, your empty stomach growling, you wonder how long this can last. Surely things will improve soon, the government will step in, the economy will recover, life will return to normal. But deep down, this isn't a temporary setback. This is something new, something vast and terrible. This is the Great Depression, and it's just getting started. You've made it to 1930 somehow. The winter was brutal, not just the cold, but the grinding uncertainty of each day. Every morning, the same question. Will I eat today? Your apartment is gone now. Couldn't make rent after December. You're staying at the YMCA when you can scrape together 15 cents for a bed on park benches when you can't. Central Park has become an unofficial campground for the newly homeless. At night, if you squint, the clusters of makeshift shelters almost look like a festival. Almost. "Morning, Professor," says Joe, nodding as you emerge from your spot beneath a cluster of pine trees. Joe was a construction worker before the crash. Now he's the unofficial mayor of this section of the park. He calls everyone Professor, regardless of their former occupation. "Any leads today?" you ask, stretching your stiff limbs. "Heard they're hiring at the docks. Just day labour, but it's something." You nod your thanks and head toward the harbour. The docks are always worth checking, though the competition for work is fierce. 500 men might show up for 20 spots unloading cargo, if there's even cargo to unload. International trade is drying up fast. The scene at the docks is exactly as you expected, a sea of desperate men. Some have been dockhands all their lives, their bodies shaped by years of lifting and hauling. Others, like you, are newcomers to this world, former office workers and shopkeepers. The foreman appears at 6 sharp. "Need 20 today," he shouts above the murmur of the crowd. The press of bodies is immediate. Everyone's surging forward. You're caught in the middle, pushed and pulled. Someone's elbow catches your ribs. Another man steps on your foot, but you keep moving forward. The foreman points randomly. You. Each man selected quickly steps aside, relief washing over their faces. By some miracle, you're chosen. Maybe it's because you've managed to keep your clothes relatively clean. Maybe it's just dumb luck. Either way, you're working today. The work is brutal, unloading crates from a ship that's come in from South America. Coffee mostly. The irony isn't lost on you. You haven't tasted real coffee in months, making do with reused grounds or chicory substitutes. Now you're handling crates of the stuff, worth more than you'll earn in a month. Slow boat, comments one of the veteran dockhands during a rare break. Usually 3 ships a week from Brazil, now maybe 1. Why's that, you ask, gulping water from a communal bucket. Tariffs, he spits. Goddamn smoot Hawley. President signed it last month, raised taxes on imports to protect American jobs. But you know what happens when we tax their goods? They tax ours back, you reply. Bingo, Professor. He doesn't know Joe calls you that too. So now nobody's buying, nobody's selling, and we're all screwed 6 ways from Sunday. The Smoot-Hawley tariff. You'd read about it in the papers. Over 1,000 economists had signed a petition begging President Hoover not to sign it. But Congress pushed it through and Hoover caved. Now international trade, already wounded by the crash, was being strangled by protectionist policies. By noon, your back is screaming and your hands are raw, but you've earned $1, a whole dollar for 6 hours of back-breaking labour. 5 years ago, you'd have scoffed at such wages. Today, it feels like winning the lottery. Same time tomorrow? You ask the foreman as he hands you your pay. He shakes his head. Ships unloaded, nothing else scheduled this week. And just like that, you're unemployed again. You use a nickel to ride the subway uptown, not towards Central Park, but to Grand Central Station. You've made a decision. New York is dying. Time to try somewhere else. The station is both busy and eerily quiet. People move with purpose, but there's a hushed quality, as if everyone's afraid to make too much noise. The giant departures board clacks as it updates. You scan for the cheapest destinations. Chicago? Your parents are there, but the shame of returning home is still too much. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, more industrial cities, probably suffering just as much as New York. Then you see it, Kansas City, the heart of farming country. Surely farmers are still doing okay. People always need to eat, right? And the ticket is just $8.75. You can almost afford it with your day's wages. You approach the ticket counter. When's the next train to Kansas City? 8:15 tonight, says the bored-looking clerk. I'll take it. You count out your money carefully, almost all of your dollar from today, plus most of your meagre savings. You're left with 45 cents to your name, but you have a ticket out. The train is crowded, mostly with people leaving the city rather than coming to it. You find a seat next to an elderly man reading a newspaper. Heading west? He asks, folding his paper. Kansas City, you reply. Thought I might find work on the farms. He gives you a look that's half pity, half amusement. Might want to rethink that plan, son. He hands you his newspaper, folded to show a headline, Dust storms ravage plains, crops destroyed. The article describes apocalyptic scenes across Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Years of over-farming combined with drought have turned the topsoil to dust. Massive clouds of it sweeping across the plains, burying farms and towns. Been farming outside Wichita for 40 years, the old man says. Never seen anything like it. Dust gets into everything. Your clothes, your food, your lungs. Can't grow a damn thing. So why are you going back, you ask. It's still home, he says simply. Where else would I go? You stare out the window as the train rumbles west, watching America roll by. The countryside should be beautiful in June, but instead it looks tired, neglected. Abandoned cars rust by the roadside. Farms sit empty, fields untended. You fall asleep eventually, lulled by the rhythm of the train. When you wake, the landscape has changed. Flatter now, the Great Plains stretching to the horizon, but the sky has a strange colour, brownish, hazy. Dust, says your companion, noticing your confused expression. We're getting close. Kansas City, when you arrive, is coated in a fine layer of brown. It's on the buildings, the streets, the few cars that move slowly through the haze. People wear bandanas over their faces as they walk. Some have goggles to protect their eyes. You pull your shirt up over your nose as you step off the train. The dust immediately coats your tongue, gritty and dry. "Oh, first time in dust country?" asks a porter, noticing your reaction. You get used to it, or you leave. Your plan to find farm work is clearly dead on arrival. If farmers can't even grow crops, they sure as hell aren't hiring. But you're here now with 45 cents and no return ticket. The porter seems to read your mind. If you're looking for work, try the rail yards. They're always needing men to clean the engines. Dust gets in the machinery. The rail yards are on the edge of town, a sprawling complex of tracks, roundhouses and repair sheds. You find the foreman's office easily enough. "Got experience with trains?" he asks, not looking up from his paperwork. "Quick learner," you offer. He sighs, finally meeting your eyes. Everyone's a quick learner these days. Got hundreds of quick learners looking for work. You're about to turn away when he adds, "But I need someone right now. Engine 4522 came in caked with dust. Needs to be cleaned before it seizes up completely. Pays 30 cents an hour. It's less than the docks in New York, but it's something. I'll take it." The work is even worse than unloading coffee. You're squeezed into the cramped spaces of a locomotive, scrubbing dust from every surface, every gear, every pipe. The air is thick with it, despite the bandana over your face. Your eyes sting, your throat burns. By day's end, you're filthy, exhausted, and have earned a grand total of $2.40. The foreman seems satisfied with your work. "Come back tomorrow," he says. "Got 3 more engines need cleaning." You find a boarding house that charges 50 cents a night. It's cleaner than the YMCA in New York at least. You use some of your earnings to buy dinner at a cheap diner. Actual hot food, the first real meal you've had in weeks. The diner is half empty, but those who are there seem to be railroad men. Their conversations revolve around reduced schedules, routes being cut. "Passenger service to Denver's being suspended," one says. "Not enough riders to justify the run." "Freight to Chicago's down 60%, adds another. "Used to be 6 trains daily. Now it's 2, and they're half empty. The railroads were America's arteries, carrying goods and people across the continent. Now they're clotting, slowing, failing. Another symptom of the economic disease spreading through the nation." You work at the rail yards for a week, cleaning engines and eventually helping with simple repairs. The dust is a constant enemy, working its way into everything, but the pay is steady and you're able to save a little. On Sunday, your day off, you explore Kansas City. The downtown is a mix of beautiful Art Deco buildings and emptied storefronts. Roughly a third of businesses appear closed. For rent and going out of business signs paper the windows. A small crowd has gathered outside a bank. Your stomach drops. Another bank run. But as you get closer, you realise it's not that. The bank is already closed, permanently. People are just standing there, staring at the locked doors, as if willing them to open. "Had my life savings in there," says a woman, noticing your gaze. 28 years of careful saving. Gone. "They didn't give you anything?" you ask. She gives a bitter laugh. 10 cents on the dollar. My $6,000 became $600, not even enough to pay off my mortgage. You do the math in your head. That's more money than you've ever had, and it vanished overnight. What will you do? You ask. She shrugs. My sister's in St. Louis, says I can stay with her. Better than the street, I guess. By August, the dust storms are getting worse. Some days the sky turns completely black at noon, as if night has fallen early. People call them black blizzards. The dust is so thick it suffocates livestock in the fields. Children die from dust pneumonia, their lungs filled with dirt. The railroad work begins to dry up. Cutting back, the foreman tells you, can only offer 3 days a week now. It's not enough to live on. You need another plan. You hear rumours that California is better off. The farms in the Central Valley are still producing. There's work picking fruit, harvesting vegetables. You've met several families heading that way, packing everything they own onto ancient cars and trucks. Go west, young man, jokes a fellow railroad worker, quoting Horace Greeley, though California ain't what it used to be either. You consider it. Your savings from the railroad work would buy a bus ticket to Los Angeles, but something holds you back. Maybe it's caution, maybe it's fear of the unknown, or maybe it's the stories you've heard. California police stationed at the state borders, turning away undesirables without proof of employment or sufficient funds. Instead, you decide to head south. Texas, Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, warmer climates where winter won't be as threatening. The bus ride to Houston takes 2 days. You arrive with sore muscles and 632 to your name. The city is bustling compared to Kansas City. The oil industry has cushioned the blow somewhat, though even here the depression's effects are visible. You find work at the docks again, this time loading cotton onto ships bound for England. It's seasonal work. The cotton harvest has just come in, but the pay is decent. 45 cents an hour, 10-hour days. You can actually save money. The boarding house you find is full of men like you, drifters, workers following jobs wherever they appear. The conversations at dinner each night are a catalogue of America's suffering. Spent the spring in Detroit, says a wiry man named Frank. Auto plants all but shut down. Ford went from 5-day work weeks to 3. People living in the factories because they got nowhere else to go. Chicago's worse, adds another. Tried to get work at the stockyards. They're killing cattle by the thousands. Government buying them just to prop up prices. Perfectly good beef being destroyed while people starve. A pattern emerges in these stories. The disconnect between abundance and scarcity. Farmers ploughing under crops they can't sell while city dwellers go hungry. Factories sitting idle while their products are desperately needed. Money concentrated in banks and corporate coffers while ordinary people have none. One night, a new arrival joins the dinner table. His name is Klaus, a German immigrant who'd been working as an engineer in Pennsylvania until the steel mills closed. America bad now? Yes, he says in accented English. But Europe, he makes a gesture like an explosion, much worse. He tells you about his family back in Berlin. His brother, an accountant, lost his job when German banks began failing in the spring. The unemployment rate in Germany is over 30% now. People are literally starving in the streets. Government does nothing, Klaus says. Too weak. People getting angry, looking for someone to blame. Who do they blame, you ask? Klaus's expression darkens. Jews, mostly. Communists. Foreigners, easy targets. There's a party, he continues, National Socialists, Nazis, they call them, very small before, now growing. Their leader, Hitler, he tells people he will make Germany strong again. Fix economy. Give people jobs, food. And people believe him, you ask. Klaus nods grimly. When you are hungry, when your children cry from empty stomachs, you believe anyone who promises food. The global connections become clearer to you now. The economic disaster that began on Wall Street is reshaping politics around the world. In Italy, Mussolini's fascist regime is consolidating power. In Japan, the military is gaining influence, pushing for expansion to secure resources. In Germany, an obscure political party is finding fertile ground for its message of hatred and resentment. The cotton season ends, and with it your dock work in Houston, but you've saved enough, almost $100, to give yourself a cushion while you look for the next opportunity. December finds you in New Orleans, working odd jobs on the riverfront. The weather is mild compared to the northern winter, and the city has a vibrancy that seems to defy the national mood. Music still spills from clubs along Basin Street, though the audiences are smaller, the tips less generous. You've become part of America's new nomadic class, following seasonal work, moving when opportunities dry up, living in boarding houses and flop houses, occasionally sleeping rough when necessary. Your possessions fit in a single knapsack. You've learned to travel light, both physically and emotionally. The radio brings news from Washington. President Hoover continues to resist direct federal intervention in the economy, believing that voluntary efforts by business leaders and private charities will eventually turn things around. The bastard just doesn't get it, says your roommate, a former bank teller from Omaha. People are dying out here, actual children starving to death in the richest country on earth, and he's talking about rugged individualism. Hoover has become a national villain, his name a bitter joke. Newspapers used to wrap around oneself for warmth are Hoover blankets. Empty pockets turned inside out are Hoover flags. The shantytowns sprouting in every city are Hoovervilles. On Christmas Day 1930, you allow yourself a small splurge. Dinner at a real restaurant with tablecloths and waiters in bow ties. It costs nearly $1, an extravagance that would have been unthinkable a year ago. But you've survived when so many others haven't. That seems worth celebrating. The restaurant is half empty. Those who are dining seem subdued, the usual holiday cheer muted. At a nearby table, a family, mother, father, 2 children, bow their heads in prayer before eating. Their clothes are well made but worn, the kind of outfits people wear when they're maintaining appearances despite reduced circumstances. Thank you, Lord, for this food, the father says quietly, and for the blessing of being together when so many families are separated by hardship. You think about your own parents in Chicago. You've sent them postcards from your various stops, but haven't seen them since before the crash. Are they okay? The shame that kept you from returning home seems petty now, a luxury from a different life. The new year brings news that the economic situation is worsening. More banks failing, 352 in 1930 alone. Unemployment climbing toward 15%. And still, Hoover resists direct federal relief, believing it would undermine American self-reliance. In Europe, the situation is even more dire. The failure of Austria's largest bank, Credit Anstalt, has triggered a financial panic across the continent. Germany, already struggling under war reparations, is watching its banking system collapse. Klaus's letters from Berlin grow increasingly alarming. People are turning to extremist parties, communists on the left, Nazis on the right. Street battles between political factions are becoming common. His last letter ended with a chilling observation. Democracy dying here. Be grateful for American stability, even now. But how stable is America, really? There are rumblings of discontent everywhere. Veterans demanding early payment of their service bonuses, farmers destroying crops rather than sell at ruinous prices, workers striking despite the risk of unemployment. In February 1931, you're in Baton Rouge when you witness something that shakes your faith in American resilience. A food riot. Hundreds of desperate people storming a grocery warehouse, overwhelming the guards, taking what they need, not stealing luxury items or cash, just flour, sugar, beans, the basics of survival. The police response is brutal. Clubs swinging, tear gas deployed. You watch from a distance, heart pounding, as people are dragged away, bloodied and handcuffed. Later, in a cheap diner, you overhear two policemen discussing the riot. "Never thought I'd see Americans behaving like that," one says, shaking his head. "Like animals." "Hunger makes animals of us all," replies his partner. "My sister's kids haven't had milk in months. If I wasn't on the force, might have been me in that warehouse." The first officer looks shocked. "You saying you sympathize with those looters?" "I'm saying hunger changes the rules. This keeps up, riots will be the least of our worries." His words stay with you as you leave Baton Rouge, heading west again. Hunger changes the rules. You've seen it yourself. Former bank managers waiting in bread lines, respectable women selling themselves for food, children picking through garbage for scraps. The America of 1931 is almost unrecognizable from the prosperous nation of just 2 years ago, and as you board another bus, destination unknown, you wonder what it will look like a year from now. The Depression is no longer a temporary crisis. It's become the new normal, a disaster that's reshaping society, politics, even human behavior, and it's far from over. Across the Atlantic, European nations are falling like dominoes. In London, the pound sterling, once the world's most stable currency, is about to be forced off the gold standard, a humiliation for the British Empire. In Berlin, the Nazi Party is gaining seats in the Reichstag, its message of economic nationalism and racial scapegoating finding an audience among the desperate and disillusioned. In Japan, military leaders are making the case for expansion, arguing that the economic crisis proves Japan must secure resources and markets abroad by force if necessary. The Great Depression isn't just an American tragedy, it's a global catastrophe that will ultimately reshape the world order, leading to conflicts and realignments that will define the 20th century. But on a Greyhound bus crossing Louisiana in the spring of 1931, all of that seems distant, academic. For now, there's just the road ahead, the next job, the next meal, survival in a world turned upside down. The bus stops at a small roadside diner. Most passengers can't afford to eat there, but they get off anyway, stretching their legs, using the bathroom. You've budgeted for a cup of coffee, a luxury that still feels worthwhile. Inside, the radio is playing. A news announcer is discussing international financial markets, the cascading bank failures in Central Europe, the pressure on Germany's already fragile economy. Now turning to domestic news, he says, his voice crisp and authoritative. President Hoover continues to express confidence that the economic situation will improve naturally without the need for direct government intervention. The diner's cook snorts derisively. Sure it will, and I'm Mary Pickford. A ripple of bitter laughter runs through the diner. The unity in that moment, strangers bound by shared hardship, shared resentment, is striking. As you board the bus again, a thought occurs to you. Maybe that's the silver lining in all this suffering. The recognition that we're in it together. That the myths of rugged individualism and self-made success are just that. Myths. If America survives this crisis, perhaps it will emerge with a new understanding of shared responsibility, of collective well-being, a recognition that an economy that enriches a few while impoverishing many is neither stable nor just. Or maybe that's just wishful thinking, the desperate hope of someone who's seen too much suffering and needs to believe it serves some purpose. The bus rumbles westward, carrying its cargo of drifters, job seekers and displaced people, each with their own story, their own losses, their own desperate hopes, a rolling microcosm of an America in crisis, moving always forward, because what else can it do? Summer 1931 finds you in California after all. The rumours of work in the agricultural sector proved too tempting to resist. The bus deposited you in Bakersfield, heart of the Central Valley, where fields of vegetables and fruit orchards stretch to the horizon. Your first impression, the rumours, weren't entirely wrong. There is work here, but there's also competition, fierce, desperate competition. Dawn at the hiring lot outside town. Hundreds of people gathered in the grey half-light, waiting for farm trucks to arrive. Men, women, even children ready to work. Many are Okies, refugees from Oklahoma and other Dust Bowl states who fled west with nothing but what they could carry. A truck pulls up and the driver stands in the bed. Need 20 pickers, 1-day job, 5 cents a bucket. The surge forward is immediate, bodies pressing, voices shouting. You're caught in the crush, elbowed and shoved. The driver points randomly. You, not you, not today. 3 more trucks, 3 more chance. Each time the same desperate press, the same arbitrary selection. By the 3rd truck, the mood is turning ugly. They're picking Mexicans over Americans, someone shouts from the back of the crowd. Those are our jobs. Shut your mouth, gringo, responds a weathered man in Spanish-accented English. Been picking here 20 years. You just showed up. Tensions rise, fists clench. The driver of the 3rd truck senses trouble and quickly selects his workers, mostly Mexican, and speeds away. See that? The first voice again. They stick together, these people. Take food from American mouths. This is new to you, this targeting of ethnicity, this anger directed horizontally rather than up at those responsible for the economic collapse. But it's becoming increasingly common. When resources are scarce, humans look for someone to blame, someone vulnerable. Someone different. You've seen it in Klaus's letters from Germany, the rising attacks on Jews and foreigners. Now you're seeing it in America's fields. A 4th truck arrives, and this time luck favours you. The driver needs 30 workers, and you're among those selected. You climb into the back, avoiding eye contact with those left behind. The work is strawberry picking, backbreaking labour under the California sun. By noon, your lower back is screaming in protest. By 3, your fingers are stained red and pricked with tiny cuts from the stems. But you work steadily, filling bucket after bucket. 5 cents a bucket. Each one holds about 2 quarts of berries. A fast picker can fill maybe 80 buckets in a day. $4, not bad compared to other work you found, but your body isn't conditioned for this. By day's end, you filled 42 buckets, $2.10 for a day of absolute physical misery. First day's the worst, says an older woman working nearby, noticing your grimace as you straighten up. Gets easier. Been doing this long? You ask. 3 years now. She wipes sweat from her forehead with a bandana. Used to own a farm in Nebraska. Bank took it. Now I pick other people's crops. Her name is Martha. She's in her 50s, skin leathered by sun and hardship. She invites you to the camp where she stays with other agricultural workers. The camp is a revelation. Hundreds of makeshift tents and shacks spread across an open field. No running water, no electricity, no sanitation. Children with distended bellies play in the dirt. Gaunt adults sit in whatever shade they can find, conserving energy for tomorrow's work. "Welcome to the promised land," Martha says with bitter irony. She introduces you to her neighbors, a family from Oklahoma, their 4 children, all under 10, a couple from Arkansas who lost their farm to the bank, a widower from Kansas whose wife died of pneumonia on the journey west. Government man came by last week, says the Oklahoman, a rail-thin man named Earl, taking pictures, asking questions, said he was from some new agency. What did he call it, Dottie? Resettlement Administration, his wife replies. Said President Hoover wanted to know about conditions. Hoover can go to hell, Earl spits. 3 years of this, and now he wants to know how we're living. We're dying is how we're living. You spend a week in the strawberry fields, then move on to lettuce, then tomatoes. Your body adapts, muscles hardening, hands callousing. The money isn't great, but it's steady, and food costs less here, so close to the source. Martha becomes something of a mentor. She's been following the harvests up and down California for years now, knows which farms treat workers fairly, which cheat on the weights, which provide water and which don't. Key is to save during peak season, she advises. August through October you can work every day, then it slows down. By winter might be only 2-3 days a week. She's built a small community here, not family by blood, but family by circumstance. They share resources, watch each other's children, care for the sick. It's a kind of mutual aid society born of necessity. One night, sitting around a small fire, someone produces a battered radio. The evening news crackles through the speaker. In international news, Great Britain today abandoned the gold standard, allowing the pound sterling to float freely on currency markets. The move comes after weeks of financial pressure and significant outflows of gold from the Bank of England. "What's that mean?" asks one of the children, surprisingly engaged by financial news. "Means even the British Empire's going broke, kid," says Earl. "Whole world's going to hell together." He's not wrong. Britain's abandonment of the gold standard in September 1931 is a seismic event in global finance. The pound sterling, once the world's most stable currency, the bedrock of international trade, is now just another piece of paper subject to market whims. Other countries follow Britain's lead, abandoning gold one by one. The international financial system, already damaged by the Depression, is now fundamentally altered. You hear rumours of work in the Imperial Valley near the Mexican border, better wages, longer season. In October, you and Martha join a caravan of cars and trucks heading south. Your contribution to gas money buys you a spot in the bed of a rusted pickup, your few possessions tucked under the seat. The Imperial Valley is even hotter than Bakersfield, the work just as hard, but the rumours prove true. More consistent employment, slightly better pay. You find yourself picking lettuce alongside workers from Mexico who cross the border daily. This close to the international line, you hear more news about the global situation. Mexico is suffering too, its economy dependent on exports to the US that have largely dried up. Across Latin America, nations that rely on selling coffee, sugar, metals and other commodities to industrial nations are facing economic collapse. The Mexican workers tell stories of villages where people are literally starving, of desperate attempts to cross into the US for work, of families torn apart by deportation. La Migra came to our camp last month, says Miguel, a young man working next to you. Took everyone without papers. My brother, they send him back. Now I don't know where he is. The Immigration Service, La Migra, has been conducting raids across California, rounding up Mexican immigrants, even those who've lived in the US for decades. The logic is simple and cruel. Fewer Mexicans means more jobs for real Americans. Never mind that most of these jobs are ones American workers often refuse. Never mind that many of those deported are legal residents, even citizens. Fear and scarcity breed cruelty. Your status as an Okie, though you're actually from New York, offers some protection. You may be poor, you may be homeless, but you're white and American-born. The privileges of those accidents of birth become clearer every day. Another raid. The shout goes up one morning as you're walking to the fields. Border Patrol vehicles roar into the camp. People scatter, running in all directions. You stand your ground, confident in your citizenship, but Martha grabs your arm, pulling you into the brush. Papers don't matter, she hisses. They take everyone, sort it out later. Could be days in detention. You watch from hiding as agents round up dozens of workers. Some protest in English, showing papers, proving citizenship. The agents are unmoved. Everyone goes into the trucks. That night, the camp is half empty. Families separated, children crying for missing parents. The work crew the next day is similarly depleted. The farmer, furious at losing half his workforce just as the harvest peaks, pays the remaining workers an extra $1 per day. Economics, Martha says, with dark humour. Supply and demand. Fewer workers, higher wages. But the raid has other consequences. Trust is damaged, community bonds frayed. Everyone eyes newcomers with suspicion. Are they workers or informants? The solidarity that made survival possible is harder to maintain. By December 1931, you've saved nearly $200, a fortune by current standards. The question is what to do with it. Banks aren't trusted. Carrying cash is dangerous. Many workers send money home to families, but you have no dependents. Martha suggests investment, not in stocks. No one trusts the market anymore, but in tools, skills, something tangible. Man I know in San Diego, she says, teaches auto repair from his garage. $20 for the course. Always need mechanics, depression, or no. It's an appealing idea. A skill no one can take from you. Useful anywhere. You decide to head to San Diego after the Imperial Valley harvest ends. The mechanic's name is Gus, a former Ford factory worker who set up shop when the Detroit plant reduced shifts. His school is just his garage with 2 cars in various states of disassembly. Welcome to the University of Hard Knocks Automotive Division, he jokes when you arrive. There are 3 other students, a teenager who dreams of racing cars, a middle-aged man recently laid off from a shipping company, and a woman in her 30s who plans to take over her father's repair shop. Lady Mechanic, the teenager says with obvious skepticism. She fixes him with a level stare. My dad lost his right arm in France during the war. Been doing most of the work myself for years, just never got the certificate. Gus is an excellent teacher, patient but demanding. For 6 weeks, you learn about engines, transmissions, electrical systems. The work is challenging, satisfying in a way picking crops wasn't. You're building something, not just harvesting what others have planted. San Diego itself is suffering less than many cities. The naval base provides stable employment for thousands. Military budgets, while reduced, haven't been cut as drastically as other sectors. There's a certain irony. The one part of government spending Hoover doesn't slash is defense. Your fellow students become friends. You share meals, stories, hopes for what comes after the Depression. The teenager, Jimmy, is the most optimistic. My uncle says it'll turn around this year, he insists one night over beans and rice in Gus's kitchen. Stock market's up from its lows, banks are more stable. The woman, Rebecca, snorts. Your uncle been saying that since 29? Jimmy flushes. This time's different. Hoover's got new plans. Hoover's a damn fool, says the middle-aged man, Frank, waiting for the natural business cycle to fix things. Meanwhile, people starve. The conversation turns to politics, as it increasingly does everywhere. 1932 is an election year. President Hoover, once hailed as a brilliant administrator and humanitarian for his work feeding Europe after the Great War, is now perhaps the most hated man in America. Who's running against him, you ask? Democrats haven't picked their candidate yet, says Gus. But word is it'll be Roosevelt, governor of New York. Any good? Asks Rebecca. Gus shrugs. Hard to say. Rich man, like all of them, but had polio, can't walk without braces. Maybe suffering teaches compassion. The conversation drifts to news from abroad. Things in Germany are deteriorating rapidly. The Nazi Party is now the second largest in the Reichstag. Hitler came close to winning the presidency, forcing aging war hero Paul von Hindenburg into a runoff. My cousin's husband is Jewish, says Rebecca. They're leaving Berlin, coming to New York, says it's getting dangerous. Why blame Jews for the economy? Jimmy asks, genuinely confused. Doesn't make sense. Sense has nothing to do with it, kid, Frank says. Fear makes people stupid. Scared people want someone to blame. In January 1932, shocking news comes from Asia. Japan has invaded Manchuria, a resource-rich region of northern China. The Imperial Japanese Army, acting without clear authorization from Tokyo, has seized a massive territory and established a puppet state. The world watches, does nothing. The League of Nations issues condemnations, but no concrete actions. Western powers, consumed by their own economic crises, have no appetite for confronting Japan. It's a chilling precedent, aggression unpunished, territorial conquest achieved through force, a lesson that won't be lost on other expansionist powers. Your auto repair course ends in February. Gus gives each student a certificate, homemade but official looking. More importantly, he gives recommendations. Buddy of mine runs a garage in Santa Monica, he tells you. Could use someone with your attention to detail, won't pay much starting out but room to grow. It's the most promising opportunity you've had since the crash. A chance for stable employment, for settling in one place, for beginning to rebuild a life. The bus ride to Los Angeles takes you through landscapes transformed by the Depression. The highways are dotted with hitchhikers, whole families walking with their possessions on their backs, makeshift camps in the roadside woods. Outside the small town of Oceanside, you see a sign that stops your heart. Bonus Army Recruiting Station. Veterans march on Washington. Join up here. The Bonus Army. You've heard about it on the radio. World War veterans, promised a service bonus to be paid in 1945, are demanding early payment due to the Depression. Thousands are planning to march on Washington to pressure Congress. The bus stops briefly in Oceanside. You step off to stretch your legs and approach the recruitment station, just a card table with two aging veterans. You serve? One asks. You shake your head. Just curious. Hell of a thing, he says. Fought for our country. Now we're fighting for what we're owed. Planning to have 20,000 veterans in DC by June. Think it'll work? You ask. He shrugs. Has to. I got kids to feed. Bonus would mean $2,000 for me. Difference between starving and surviving. Back on the bus, you ponder what might happen if the government refuses the veterans' demands. 20,000 trained soldiers, desperate, angry, converging on the capital. Could it lead to revolution, to military coup? America's democratic traditions seem strong, but hunger changes the rules, as that policeman in Baton Rouge said. Los Angeles appears on the horizon, sprawling and hazy. Despite the Depression, it's growing, fueled by the fledgling movie industry and the migration of Dust Bowl refugees. The contrasts are stark. Opulent Beverly Hills mansions, visible from Hooverville shantytowns, gleaming new office buildings next to soup kitchens with lines around the block. Your new job at the Santa Monica garage starts poorly. The owner, Hank, is nothing like Gus. Impatient, critical, quick to anger. The pay is lower than promised, 20 cents an hour instead of 30. But it's steady work and you're indoors and your back doesn't ache every night like it did in the fields. You rent a small room in a boarding house near the beach, $5 a week, including breakfast. It's the first real home you've had since leaving your New York apartment in 1930. The other boarders are a mix of the barely employed, a movie studio janitor, a part-time secretary, a night watchman. Everyone's struggling, but they've held on to these threads of normalcy. A roof, a bed, regular meals. One night in April, sitting on the boarding house porch, you witness something that encapsulates the madness of the Depression economy. On the beach, city workers are burning oranges, thousands of them piled high and set aflame. The night watchman, Ed, explains, government buys surplus crops to keep prices up, can't give them away, that would drive prices down, so they destroy them. The sheer insanity of it, food being destroyed while people go hungry, leaves you speechless. The economics might make some theoretical sense, but the human reality is obscene. The next day at work, a well-dressed man brings in a brand new Packard for service. While Hank fawns over him, you change the oil, check the belts, top off fluids. It's routine work, but the car itself is a marvel, evidence that not everyone is suffering equally. Movie producer, Hank tells you after the man leaves. They're still making money hand over fist. Seems the worse things get, the more people want to escape to the pictures. It's true. Despite, or because of, the Depression, Americans are flocking to cinemas. For a quarter, they can forget their troubles for 2 hours, lose themselves in glamour and adventure and romance. The movie industry is one of the few thriving sectors of the economy. That weekend, flush with your weekly pay, you treat yourself to a film, Public Enemy, starring James Cagney. The theatre is packed, the audience raucous, when Cagney's gangster character rises from poverty to wealth through crime. Some in the crowd cheer. The moral comeuppance at the end is met with boos. It's another sign of changing attitudes. Pre-crash, such a reaction would have been unthinkable. Now, traditional notions of morality are bending under economic pressure. If banks can steal life savings, if governments can burn food while children starve, why shouldn't an ordinary man turn to crime? May brings news that the bonus army is growing larger than expected. Veterans from across the country are converging on Washington, building a massive encampment. President Hoover refuses to meet with them. Congress debates the bonus bill half-heartedly. The boarding house gets a new resident, a journalist named Helen, who works for a small left-wing newspaper. Her stories focus on labour disputes, union organising, the conditions in worker camps. At dinner each night, she shares news that doesn't make the mainstream press. Steel workers in Pennsylvania just called a strike, she announces one evening. 5,000 men. Company brought in armed guards. There's going to be violence. Cops or National Guard? Asks Ed. Both, Helen says grimly. Governors in the company's pocket. This too is becoming commonplace. State power deployed to break strikes, protect property, maintain an economic order that's failing most Americans. The facade of neutrality is wearing thin. In June, shocking news arrives from Washington. The Senate has rejected the bonus bill. The bonus army camps remain, growing larger and more permanent. The veterans vow to stay until they receive justice. Helen returns from a reporting trip to the Imperial Valley, where you worked months earlier. They're organising, she says excitedly. Farm workers, both Mexican and American, demanding higher wages, better conditions. It's unprecedented. Won't last, says Ed. They'll just bring in the cops, break it up. Maybe, Helen acknowledges, but something's changing. People aren't afraid anymore. What's the worst that can happen? Poverty? They're already there. She's right. Across America, a new militancy is emerging. Coal miners in Kentucky, auto workers in Michigan, textile workers in Massachusetts. Strikes and organizing drives are spreading despite violent opposition from employers and authorities. The Depression is entering its fourth year. The initial shock has worn off. The hope for quick recovery has died. What remains is a grim determination, a growing anger, a radical questioning of the system itself. In your small room, you sometimes take out the dollar bills from your weekly pay and stare at them. These pieces of paper, once so reliable, have been revealed as fragile constructs, their value dependent on collective faith that has been severely shaken. If money can evaporate overnight, if work doesn't guarantee survival, if governments burn food while people starve, what other certainties might prove false? What other foundational assumptions might crumble? These are the questions being asked across America, across the world, as the Great Depression grinds on, and the answers, when they come, will reshape global politics, economics and society for decades to come. The old order is dying. What will replace it remains uncertain. But in boarding houses and Hoovervilles, in farm fields and factory floors, in the corridors of power and the back rooms of radical politics, the future is being negotiated, fought over, born in pain and possibility. And you, like millions of others, are caught in this historical current, swept along by forces beyond individual control, trying simply to stay afloat while the world transforms around you. July 1932 brings news that stops conversations mid-sentence. President Hoover has ordered the US Army to clear the bonus army from Washington. Your boarding house gathers around the radio, listening in stunned silence as the announcer describes tanks rolling down Pennsylvania Avenue, cavalry charging with sabres drawn, infantry advancing with bayonets fixed, all against unarmed veterans, many with wives and children. Jesus Christ, whispers Ed, the night watchman. They're using gas against their own soldiers. The details are horrific. Troops commanded by General Douglas MacArthur, against direct orders, pursued the veterans across the Anacostia River and burned their camp to the ground. 2 veterans killed, dozens wounded, including a 12-week-old baby who died from tear gas exposure. "This is how republics die," says Helen, the journalist, her voice shaking with anger, "when armies march on citizens." That night, none of you sleep well. The radio keeps broadcasting updates, each more disturbing than the last. Photos in the next day's papers show Washington in flames, American soldiers attacking American veterans, families fleeing with whatever possessions they could grab. "This will end Hoover," predicts your landlady at breakfast. "No coming back from this." She's right. The bonus army attack becomes a political catastrophe for an already unpopular president. With the election just months away, Herbert Hoover, once regarded as a humanitarian genius for feeding starving Europeans after the Great War, has cemented his image as callous and cruel. Franklin Roosevelt, the Democratic nominee, doesn't need to attack Hoover directly. The contrast speaks for itself, Roosevelt promising a New Deal for the American people, while Hoover sends tanks against hungry veterans. Work at the garage continues, though business is slow. Fewer people can afford cars, and those who have them put off repairs as long as possible. Hank cuts your hours, then your wages. By August, you're making barely enough to cover your room and board. But you're luckier than most. At least 25% of Americans are completely unemployed. Millions more work reduced hours for reduced pay. Homelessness has reached unprecedented levels. Entire families living in parks, under bridges, in makeshift shanty towns. The presidential campaign dominates conversation. Roosevelt's promises of direct federal action, jobs programs, banking reform, support for farmers spark hope. But there's skepticism too. "Rich man born with a silver spoon," says Frank, a fellow mechanic at the garage. "What does he know about suffering?" "He knows about disability," counters Helen. "Man can barely walk from polio. That changes your perspective." One evening, Helen brings a guest to dinner. A German journalist named Werner, who's reporting on the American Depression for newspapers back home. His observations are chilling. "What happens here is mirrored in Germany, but worse," he explains. "Our unemployment is 30%, maybe higher. Inflation destroyed savings years ago. Now this depression destroys everything else." "And Hitler?" someone asks. Werner's face darkens. "Rising. Nazis now largest party in Reichstag. Not majority, but plurality. Hitler demands to be chancellor." "Will it happen?" you ask. "I fear yes. Traditional conservatives think they can control him." Werner gives a bitter laugh, like thinking you can control a tiger once you let it out of its cage. The German situation feels distant, academic almost, compared to the immediate crisis in America. But the connections are becoming clearer. The financial collapse that began on Wall Street in 1929 has destabilized governments worldwide, created openings for extremists, pushed nations toward conflict rather than cooperation. Werner shares stories from other European countries, Britain forcing civil servants to take pay cuts, France struggling with government paralysis, Spain declaring itself a republic after the king fled. Everywhere, the old order is under pressure, cracking, sometimes collapsing. In September, you lose your job at the garage. Hank can't afford to keep 3 mechanics with business so slow. As the newest hire, you're the first cut. He seems genuinely regretful. "Keep your tools," he says gruffly. "Good mechanic like you will find something, but you don't. Not in Los Angeles anyway. The city is flooded with job seekers from the Dust Bowl states, willing to work for almost nothing. After 2 weeks of searching, you face a hard truth. It's time to move again." The question is where. Winter is coming, making the northern states less appealing. The Dust Bowl continues to devastate the plains. California is better than most places, but competition for jobs is fierce. You decide to head east, toward Arizona and New Mexico. There's talk of government projects starting up. Dams, roads, bridges, the kind of heavy construction that needs mechanics to maintain equipment. Before leaving, you write to your parents in Chicago, the first contact in over a year. The letter is brief, apologetic for the silence, assuring them you're surviving, asking about their situation. You leave the boarding house address for any reply. The bus east is half empty, unusual for Depression-era transport. The driver explains why. "Borders closed," he says, during a rest stop in San Bernardino. "Arizona police turning folks back if they don't have money or confirmed jobs, $100 or proof of employment. They can do that? Stop American citizens from entering a state?" The driver shrugs. "Been doing it for months. Call it immigration inspection. Really, they're just keeping out the poor." You count your money. $87, not enough to guarantee passage, but you've learned a few things about survival in these years on the road. At the next stop, you hide most of your cash in your shoe, keeping just $5 in your wallet. If questioned, you'll show your mechanic's certificate, claim you have a job waiting. The border crossing is as described. California Highway Patrol on one side, Arizona officers on the other. They board the bus, checking each passenger. "Business in Arizona?" asks a square-jawed officer when he reaches your seat. "Mechanic," you reply, showing your certificate from Gus's course. "Got work waiting in Phoenix." He eyes you skeptically. "Where at?" You give the name of a garage you saw in a newspaper ad. He seems satisfied, moves on. The man behind you isn't so lucky. No job, only $12 to his name. The officers escort him off the bus. Through the window, you watch him standing forlornly on the roadside as you pull away. Phoenix in October is pleasantly warm after the coastal chill of Los Angeles. The city is suffering, like everywhere, but less severely than some. The surrounding agricultural areas provide some economic cushion. You find work at a construction company maintaining trucks and earth-moving equipment. The pay is decent, 40 cents an hour, and the job relatively secure. The company has contracts for several government projects, including a new dam on the Salt River. The boarding house you find is more basic than the one in Santa Monica, but clean and affordable. Your roommate is a surveyor named Paul who works for the same construction company. Or road projects mostly, he explains when asked what the company builds. Government finally figured out that paying men to build highways beats paying them to do nothing. These aren't formal federal programs, not yet, but state governments, counties and cities are increasingly funding public works to create employment. It's still inadequate, reaching only a tiny fraction of the jobless, but it represents a shift in thinking. As Election Day approaches, the campaign intensifies. Hoover, knowing he's likely to lose, becomes more desperate, warning that Roosevelt's plans amount to socialism, that federal relief will destroy American self-reliance, that only traditional market solutions can restore prosperity. Roosevelt counters with confidence and optimism, promising action instead of ideology. His campaign song, "Happy Days Are Here Again," becomes an anthem of hope. On November 8, 1932, the nation votes. The results are decisive. Roosevelt wins 42 states to Hoover's 6. Democrats take control of both houses of Congress. It's a mandate for change, a repudiation of Hoover's hands-off approach to the crisis. But the election creates a dangerous vacuum. Roosevelt won't take office until March 4th, 1933, 4 months away. This gap, later viewed as dangerously long, will lead to the 20th Amendment, moving inauguration to January. For now, a repudiated president remains in office while conditions continue to deteriorate. December brings news from Germany that confirms Werner's fears. President Hindenburg has appointed Adolf Hitler as Chancellor, believing the conservative cabinet will control the Nazi leader. The tiger is out of its cage. Mark my words, says a history professor who stays at your boarding house while visiting Phoenix. This man Hitler will not be controlled. Europe is sleepwalking toward disaster. His words echo in your mind as Christmas 1932 arrives, your 4th since the crash. The holiday is subdued at the boarding house, though someone produces a small tree decorated with homemade ornaments. Everyone contributes to a common dinner, more food than many have seen in months. To 1933, Paul raises a glass of cheap wine. Can't possibly be worse than 32. But it begins worse. In January, news comes that food riots have broken out in several cities. In Iowa, farmers have blocked roads, preventing produce from reaching markets, demanding higher prices. In Detroit, former auto workers have seized a Ford plant, occupying it until police drove them out with tear gas. February brings the attempted assassination of President-elect Roosevelt in Miami. The bullet misses him, but kills Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak. The nation holds its breath. How much more can the system take? Then, just days before Roosevelt's inauguration, the banking system finally collapses completely. Years of pressure, bank runs, failing loans, vanishing reserves culminate in total seizure. Banks across the country close their doors. Currency becomes scarce. Commerce grinds to a halt. Your construction company suspends operations. They can't make payroll with banks closed. You're out of work again, though the foreman assures everyone it's temporary, just until the banks sort themselves out, he promises. But no one believes the banks will simply sort themselves out. The financial system that underpins modern capitalism is in cardiac arrest. Only massive intervention can restart it. On March 4th, 1933, the nation gathers around radios to hear Roosevelt's inaugural address. His words crackle through the static. "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance." The room falls silent as he continues, acknowledging the crisis directly, offering no magic solutions but promising action, immediate, concrete action. This nation asks for action, and action now. I shall ask the Congress for broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency, as great as the power that would be given to me if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe. The response is electric. For the first time in years, there is a sense that the government will actually do something, not wait for natural recovery, not protect the interests of banks and businesses at the expense of ordinary people, but take direct action to alleviate suffering. Roosevelt's first act comes immediately, declaring a national bank holiday, closing all financial institutions to prevent further collapse. Then, in a flurry of activity that will become known as the 100 Days, his administration pushes through legislation, creating jobs programs, regulating banks, supporting farmers, establishing a social safety net. The Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, is among the first programs announced. Young men will work on environmental projects, building parks, planting trees, controlling erosion, in exchange for food, housing, and $30 per month, $25 of which must be sent home to their families. Your roommate, Paul, is ecstatic. Finally, someone actually doing something instead of just talking about market corrections and natural cycles. People need jobs. Roosevelt's creating them. Not everyone is pleased. Your landlord, who owns several properties, complains bitterly about socialism and handouts. A banker who boards with you warns of inflation and government overreach. But they're minority voices now. Most Americans, desperate after 4 years of suffering, welcome any change from the status quo. By April, your construction company restarts operations, bolstered by new federal contracts for road building. The work is steady again, the pay reliable. It's not prosperity, not even close, but it's stability, a platform to stand on rather than quicksand. Letters finally arrive from your parents. Their situation in Chicago has been difficult but not desperate. Your father's job as a postal worker provided security when little else did. They're relieved to hear from you, eager for you to visit when possible. The shame that kept you away seems foolish now, a relic from before the crash when individual failure carried stigma. The Depression has taught a different lesson, that economic disaster can strike anyone, that survival depends more on luck and systemic factors than personal virtue or vice. You write back, promising to visit when you can save enough for the journey. For the first time in years, such planning seems reasonable rather than fantasy. May brings news of the Agricultural Adjustment Act designed to raise crop prices by paying farmers to produce less. It's counterintuitive economics, deliberately reducing supply to increase prices, but the alternative has been demonstrated. Bumper crops that farmers can't sell at any profit, food destroyed while people go hungry. The National Industrial Recovery Act follows in June, establishing codes of fair competition, minimum wages, maximum hours. It's an unprecedented government intervention in the economy, directly challenging the laissez-faire approach that dominated American capitalism for generations. Critics call it un-American, unconstitutional, the end of free enterprise. Supporters call it salvation, the necessary evolution of capitalism to save it from its own excesses. History will render complicated verdicts on the New Deal. Some programs will work, others fail, some will be struck down by the Supreme Court, others will become permanent features of American life. But in the moment, in 1933, what matters is that someone is finally acting with urgency and purpose. The sense of abandonment that characterized the Hoover years has been replaced by engagement. The government is no longer a bystander to suffering, but an active participant in relief. By summer, the first cautious signs of recovery appear. Unemployment remains catastrophically high, still over 20%, but no longer rising. Industrial production increases slightly. Bank deposits, protected now by the new Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, begin to grow as confidence returns. In Germany, meanwhile, Hitler consolidates power with terrifying speed. Opposition parties are banned, trade unions dissolved, a compliant Reichstag passes the Enabling Act, giving Hitler dictatorial powers. Jewish businesses are boycotted, then seized. Book burnings eliminate un-German literature. Letters from Werner, the German journalist, grow increasingly desperate, then stop altogether. Helen learns through colleagues that he's fled to France, part of the first wave of refugees from Nazi persecution. The news from Europe serves as a chilling reminder of what might have happened in America without the pressure valve of democratic change. The same economic disaster that brought Roosevelt to power in the US delivered Germany into Hitler's hands. Different systems, different cultures, different outcomes, but the same underlying cause. In July, you finally have enough saved to consider the trip to Chicago. Paul convinces you to wait until Labor Day weekend, when the company shuts down for 3 days, giving you time for a proper visit without risking your job. The cross-country journey by bus is a survey of America in the early stages of recovery. Signs of the Depression remain everywhere. Abandoned farms, shuttered factories, men still riding the rails or hitchhiking in search of work. But there are also new sights. CCC camps with young men in uniform building roads and parks, Public Works Administration, PWA projects constructing schools, courthouses, bridges, farmers ploughing fields under government programs. The bus passes through northern Arizona, where Navajo and Hopi reservations have been particularly hard hit. Traditional economies already marginalized by decades of federal policy have been devastated by the Depression. Here, New Deal programs are making little headway, their benefits flowing primarily to white communities. In New Mexico, you see the strange juxtaposition of ancient pueblos and modern conservation projects, CCC workers building flood controls to protect structures that have stood for centuries. Crossing the plains, evidence of the Dust Bowl is inescapable. In western Kansas, the bus drives through a dust storm, not a major black blizzard, but bad enough to reduce visibility to yards, to coat everything inside the bus with fine grit despite closed windows. Faces of farmers visible through the murk are stoic, resigned, as if they've accepted apocalypse as their daily condition. Chicago, when you finally arrive, is both familiar and transformed. The city of your childhood retains its physical shape, its distinctive architecture, its lakefront beauty, but the human geography has changed dramatically. Hoovervilles dot the parks, breadlines circle blocks, factories that once roared with production stand silent. Your parents' modest home in a working-class neighbourhood is unchanged, though showing signs of deferred maintenance. The reunion is emotional, your mother crying, your father pretending not to. 4 years of separation, of uncertainty, of worry dissolved in tearful embraces. They've aged more than time alone would explain. Your father's hair, dark when you left, is now mostly grey. Your mother's face carries new lines, her hands more gnarled from work. The depression has extracted its toll even from those who maintained employment. Over dinner, simple but abundant, clearly prepared with savings and care, they share stories of neighbourhood changes. The Millers next door lost their house to the bank. The Kavanaghs down the street took in relatives from the countryside. The corner store now operates on credit and barter, as much as cash. And Mr. Petrovich, you ask, remembering the stern baker who gave you your first job as a delivery boy. Your parents exchange glances. Killed himself in 31, your father says quietly, after the bank took his shop. The human cost of economic disaster, measured not just in jobs lost and homes foreclosed, but in lives shattered, families separated, suicides, stress-induced illnesses, dreams abandoned. Statistics can't capture the depth of suffering, the psychological trauma of a system collapsing. You share your own journey. New York to Kansas to California to Arizona, the jobs taken and lost, the people met, the scenes witnessed, your parents listen with expressions mixing pride at your survival and horror at what you've endured. We wanted to send money, your mother says, but we didn't know where you were, and things were tight here too. I know, you assure her. I wouldn't have taken it anyway. Too stubborn. Your father chuckles. Still got that quality, I see. The visit passes too quickly. 3 days of catching up, reconnecting, promising more regular contact in the future. Then it's back on the bus, returning to Arizona, to your job, to the life you've constructed from the wreckage of the crash. As the bus pulls away, your mother waves from the porch, your father standing stoically beside her. You wonder when you'll see them again, or if. They're aging, the world remains unstable despite Roosevelt's efforts. The recovery is fragile, incomplete, potentially temporary. The return journey feels different. Where the outbound trip surveyed an America beginning to heal, the return seems to emphasize how much damage remains, how far the nation still has to go. In Iowa, you pass a farm auction, a family's possessions spread on the yard, their land and equipment being sold to cover bank debts. The family stands to the side, the children crying, the parents stone-faced. It's a scene repeated thousands of times across rural America. At a rest stop in Nebraska, you meet a family travelling west. Father, mother, 4 children crammed into a rusted car with their belongings tied to the roof. The father speaks with a mixture of desperation and hope. Heard there's work in Wyoming, he says. Dam project, government work. You don't have the heart to tell him about the hundreds who line up for each job on government projects, the preference given to local residents, the likelihood of disappointment. Let him keep hope alive a little longer. As the bus crosses the Colorado-Utah border, the driver announces news heard on the radio at the last stop. The National Recovery Administration, NRA, has established new codes for the auto industry, raising minimum wages to 40 cents an hour, reducing the work week to 35 hours, abolishing child labour. Good for workers, good for the economy, declares an older man across the aisle. More money in pockets means more spending means more production means more jobs. Socialism, mutters another passenger. Government telling business what to do. It's un-American. The debate that has divided the nation since Roosevelt's inauguration plays out in microcosm on a Greyhound bus crossing the desert. Is the New Deal a necessary evolution of capitalism or its destruction? Is it temporary emergency measures or permanent transformation? Does it go too far or not far enough? What no one questions anymore is the government's responsibility to act. The laissez-faire approach of the early Depression years has been thoroughly discredited. The debate now is about how to act, not whether to act. As Phoenix appears on the horizon, you reflect on the journey. Not just this bus ride, but the 4 years since the crash. You've traversed the continent, worked dozens of jobs, witnessed suffering on a scale previously unimaginable in America, survived when many didn't. The depression isn't over. Recovery is partial, fragile, unevenly distributed. Millions remain unemployed, homeless, hungry. The banking system, while stabilized, is fundamentally altered. International trade, crippled by tariffs and nationalist policies, remains far below pre-crash levels. And beyond America's borders, the global consequences of economic collapse continue to unfold. In Germany, Hitler's regime becomes more oppressive by the day. In Japan, militarists gain influence, pushing for expansion. In Spain, political divisions deepen, foreshadowing civil war. The Great Depression has reshaped not just economics, but politics, culture, social relations, individual psychology. It has demonstrated both human vulnerability to systemic failure and human resilience in the face of disaster. What comes next remains uncertain. Will Roosevelt's programs succeed in rebuilding the economy? Will democracy survive the pressures of extremism born from economic desperation? Will nations cooperate to restore international stability or turn inward toward nationalism and conflict? These questions hang in the balance as 1933 progresses, as you return to your job in Phoenix, as the world continues its painful evolution from the catastrophic collapse of 1929. What is certain is that nothing will be the same. The old certainties about markets, about government, about individual responsibility and collective obligation have been irrevocably altered. The world is being remade, for better or worse, in the crucible of economic disaster. Winter 1934 settles over Phoenix with surprising chill. The desert nights drop below freezing, and your boarding house's thin walls offer little protection. You and the other residents gather in the common room at night, sharing body heat and stories. Heard from my cousin in Oklahoma yesterday, says a new resident named Mac, a bricklayer working on a government school project. Says they've had 14 dust storms since January. 14. Can't see the sun for days at a time. The Dust Bowl is intensifying. What began as a curiosity, unusual dust storms in the plains, has become an environmental catastrophe unlike anything in American history. Years of overplowing combined with drought have turned the topsoil of America's breadbasket into a massive cloud of dirt that darkens skies from Texas to Nebraska. "My sister sent me this," says Paul, your roommate, pulling a jar from his pack. Inside is nothing but dirt. Fine, almost like talcum powder. Swept it off her kitchen table in Amarillo. Said this much collects every day, even with the windows sealed. You uncork the jar and touch the dirt. It's impossibly fine, like nothing you've ever felt before. This isn't ordinary soil. It's the pulverized remains of farms, livelihoods, communities. "There's no stopping it," Mac says grimly. "Government's trying, planting trees as wind breaks, teaching different farming methods, but it's too late. That land is dead for a generation, maybe more." The environmental disaster compounds the economic one, creating a wave of migration unlike anything America has experienced. Hundreds of thousands of Okies, though they come from Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, and Colorado as much as Oklahoma, are fleeing west, looking for work, for survival, for escape from the choking dust. Your construction job has remained steady through the winter, though the company now operates differently under New Deal regulations, minimum wage standards, maximum hour restrictions, the end of child labour. The relationship between employers and workers is being fundamentally rewritten by federal mandate. Not everyone is pleased. Your boss, Mr. Sullivan, grumbles constantly about government interference and coddling workers, but he complies because the New Deal works as both carrot and stick, offering federal contracts to companies that follow the rules, shutting out those that don't. The changes are evident across Phoenix. The Public Works Administration is funding a new post office downtown, a school on the west side, improvements to roads and bridges. The Civilian Conservation Corps has camps in the surrounding mountains, employing young men to build fire breaks, trails, and campgrounds. It's far from a complete recovery. Unemployment nationally still hovers around 20%. Breadlines and soup kitchens continue to operate. Hoovervilles remain fixtures in every city, but there's a sense of direction now, of purpose, of systems being built to prevent the worst suffering. February brings alarming news from Europe. Austrian Nazis, emboldened by Hitler's success in Germany, attempt a coup, assassinating Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss. The coup fails, but only due to intervention from Mussolini's Italy, which fears German expansion toward the Mediterranean. It's coming, predicts a professor who gives weekly talks at the YMCA. Another European war. The Depression has destabilized everything, empowered extremists, left democratic governments weak and discredited. The international news feels distant until a German family moves into your boarding house, refugees who fled Hitler's regime with little more than the clothes on their backs. Heinrich was a lawyer in Berlin, his wife Ava a teacher. Now they work menial jobs. He is a janitor, she as a hotel maid, while struggling to learn English. First, they take Jewish jobs, Heinrich explains one evening in halting English. Then Jewish businesses, then Jewish homes. We see what comes next, so we leave. Their presence makes the European situation visceral, immediate. These aren't just newspaper headlines or radio reports. They're human lives disrupted by the same economic forces that reshaped your own existence. In March, you receive a promotion at the construction company, foreman of the mechanical shop, overseeing repairs and maintenance for the growing fleet of trucks and earth-moving equipment. The pay increase is substantial, 65 cents an hour, nearly double what you made before. For the first time since the crash, you begin to save money beyond an emergency fund. The promotion brings new responsibilities, new challenges. You're supervising men now, some older and more experienced than yourself, making decisions that affect others' livelihoods. One of your first tests comes when a young mechanic named Charlie consistently shows up late, his work sloppy and incomplete. The old you might have fired him immediately. Jobs are scarce, workers replaceable. But something makes you ask questions instead. My wife's sick, Charlie confesses when confronted. TB, I'm up all night with her, then take her to the sanatorium for treatments before work. Pre-depression tuberculosis treatment was expensive but available. Now the public health system is overwhelmed. Treatment facilities have waiting lists. Medications are rationed. Charlie and his wife have fallen through gaps in the safety net, their lives becoming collateral damage of economic collapse. Or start your shift an hour later, you tell him. Make it up at the end of the day and talk to Helen at my boarding house. Her newspaper did a story on a new federal TB program. Might help your wife get better treatment. It's a small act of solidarity, of recognition that survival now depends on mutual support, on bending rules, on seeing the humanity behind economic transactions, the same lessons that Martha taught you in the California fields, that Joe showed you in the Central Park camp, that strangers demonstrated through 100 small kindnesses during your cross-country journey. April brings the worst dust storm yet, a massive front that begins in the plains but carries eastward, darkening skies as far as Washington, D.C., dropping dirt on the White House lawn, coating ships in New York Harbor. They're calling it Black Gold Rush, railroads, and a sense of adventure weren't what really built the Wild West. The contribution of these factors was only limited to drawing people to the frontier. The Wild West didn't become civilized until women arrived, and no, we're not talking about the wives and mothers of settlers. We're talking about the madams, the ladies of the lines, and the soiled doves who used the world's oldest profession to transform lawless camps into actual communities. Here's what life was really like for a woman working in a Wild West brothel. So, yeah, if these stories work for you, subscribe. And I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Comment below. Last week, someone from Canada said they listen during lunch breaks. Not judging, just wasn't expecting that. Alright, Wild West brothels tonight. But wait, are you comfortable? No, really. Check. Pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled. Your eyes flutter open to darkness. For a moment, panic grips you. Where are you? The thin mattress beneath you isn't your bed. The smell is wrong. Tobacco, whiskey, cheap perfume, and something else. Something human. Then it all comes rushing back. You're in Silver Creek, 1876, in a tiny room above a saloon that now doubles as your workplace and home. The space is hardly bigger than a closet. They call these cribs, just enough room for a narrow bed with a worn-out straw mattress, a small washstand with a chipped porcelain basin, and a three-legged stool that wobbles when you sit on it. Your few possessions are stuffed into a trunk at the foot of the bed. Unlike your cozy bed back home, this mattress crinkles when you move. It's covered in oilcloth to make it easier to clean between clients. Christ, it's cold. The thin blanket does nothing against the mountain chill that seeps through the gaps in the wooden walls. The cold is different here in the Rockies. It cuts right through to your bones. Nothing like back east. You can hear someone coughing in the next room. These walls are so thin you can practically hear people thinking. 3 days you've been here, and already you know that Molly in the next room talks in her sleep, and the girl 2 doors down cries silently every night. Rise and shine, ladies' coffee's hot and the day's wasting. That's Sadie, the madam. Her voice carries through the building like a trumpet. You can picture her already, all 5 feet of her wrapped in a silk robe, her greying hair still in papers, marching down the hall to make sure her girls are up and moving. You glance out the small window. It's not even dawn yet, just a hint of grey on the horizon, but the mines start their shifts early and there's money to be made from men coming off the night shift. Not that you're exactly rolling in cash. 3 days in and you've made just enough to cover your room and board with a few dollars to spare. Martha, you awake in there? Got a gentleman asking for you special like? Sadie's voice is right outside your door now. You sit up, rubbing sleep from your eyes. I'm up. Good girl. Wash up and come down, and for God's sake put some rouge on. You look like death warmed over. You can hear her shuffling away, muttering something about green girls and breaking them in right. You're not actually Martha. Your real name is Eleanor Blackwood, but Sadie said Eleanor sounded too proper for this line of work, and customers like simpler names. So Martha, you became the moment you walked through her door, desperate and broke after your husband gambled away everything and then vanished in the night. In your head, you're still screaming, how did I end up here? This is how I die, in a crib, in a mining town. But outwardly, you're calm. You've always been good at keeping your face blank, a skill that's serving you well now. The wash basin water is ice cold, making you gasp as you splash it on your face. No time to heat it up. You've learned that much already. In this business, time is literally money, and hot water is a luxury reserved for paying customers. You pull a brush through your hair and pinch your cheeks hard to bring some colour. The rouge is in a small tin on the washstand, bright red and waxy. You dab some on your lips and cheeks, wincing at how garish it looks in the small cracked mirror. Nothing like the subtle beauty you once prided yourself on. Martha, he ain't gonna wait all day. Sadie's voice again, impatient now. You throw on your work dress, a red satin thing with too much lace and a neckline that makes you flush every time you catch your reflection. 3 days ago, you would have died before wearing something like this. Amazing how quickly necessity changes your standards. Your dress back home wouldn't last a day here. It's funny. I spent so much on those proper dresses and they were basically just wall decoration compared to what I need now. The floorboards creak as you make your way down the narrow stairs. The saloon below is never completely quiet, but at this hour it's subdued. Just a couple of miners nursing drinks at the bar, and the piano player slumped over his keys, snoring softly. And there's your gentleman caller, a big bearded man in dirty work clothes, his face weathered by sun and wind. He's nervously twisting his hat in his hands, and when he sees you, his face breaks into a smile that reveals several missing teeth. "This here's Joe," Sadie says, patting his shoulder. "He's a good one, pays fair and don't cause trouble. Treat him nice, Martha." Joe nods at you, still twisting his hat. "Ma'am," he says, surprisingly soft-spoken for such a big man. Sadie gives you a little push toward the stairs. "Room 3's open, 20 minutes, not a minute more. I'll be timing." And just like that, your workday has begun before the sun has even cleared the mountains. Not quite what you pictured when you headed west after reading those pamphlets about opportunity and adventure. As you lead Joe up the stairs, you can't help but think about the journey that brought you here. 6 months ago, you were a respectable shopkeeper's wife in Boston. Then Thomas lost the shop in a card game, took what little money you had left, and disappeared. The shame of it drove you west, where no one would know your story. You thought you'd find work as a seamstress or maybe a cook, but in a town with 20 men for every woman, the best paying job was obvious. And after 3 days of hunger, watching your last coins disappear, you found yourself knocking on Sadie's door. "You ever done this kind of work before, honey?" she'd asked, eyeing you up and down. "No, ma'am," you'd admitted. "Didn't think so." You got that look, like you still believe in fairy tales. She'd sighed then. "Well, you're pretty enough, and men like a fresh face. You can stay, but you follow my rules. No drinking on the job, no stealing from customers, no getting attached. They're not here to save you, they're here to buy what you're selling. Understand?" You'd nodded, not trusting yourself to speak. "Good. Now, first things first, we need to get you proper clothes and teach you how to paint your face. Men don't pay for plain." That first night had been the hardest. You'd cried afterward, silently in your little crib room. But by the second night, you were too tired to cry, and now, on your 4th day, you're already developing the 1,000-yard stare that all the other girls have, looking through the men rather than at them. After Joe leaves, looking considerably happier than when he arrived, you count your earnings. $2, not bad for 20 minutes of uncomfortable work. At this rate, if you're careful with your money, you might be able to save enough to get out of here in a few months. Maybe head to California or up to Oregon, somewhere with more women where you could blend in and start over. But for now, you're here, and Sadie's calling for you again. "Martha got another one for you, and bring down them sheets. Maggie's doing laundry today." You strip the bed and bundle up the sheets. The day has properly begun now, the sun peeking over the mountains, casting long shadows across the muddy main street. From your window you can see the town coming to life. Miners heading to or from their shifts, a wagon delivering goods to the general store, the blacksmith already at his forge. Silver Creek is barely a town, just one main street with a handful of businesses: the saloon, brothel, the general store, a barbershop that doubles as a dentist's office, the blacksmith, and a small hotel for travellers. There's a church being built at the edge of town, but it's been half finished for months. Priorities in a mining town are clear: pleasure before piety. You head downstairs with your bundle of sheets. The saloon is busier now, and you feel eyes following you as you cross to the back door where Maggie is already at work with the washing. "Morning, Martha," she says, not looking up from her scrubbing. "Just drop 'em in the pile there." Maggie's been here longest of all the girls, almost 40, ancient in this profession. Too old for the cribs now, she handles the cleaning, cooking, and occasionally sings when the piano player is sober enough to accompany her. She knows everything about everyone in town, and is your best source of information so far. "How do you sleep, honey?" she asks, wringing out a sheet with surprisingly strong hands. "Not great," you admit. "It's so noisy here." She laughs at that. "Honey, you think it's noisy now? Wait till payday on Friday. This place will be jumping till dawn. You'll make good money, though. Any advice for, getting through it?" Maggie finally looks up at you, her face a map of fine lines and hard living. But her eyes are kind. "Find somewhere else in your head to go. That's what I always did. And save every penny you can. This ain't a job you can do forever." You nod, grateful for her honesty if not her optimism. "And watch out for the Barlow brothers," she adds, turning back to her washing. "They come in here acting sweet, but they get mean when they drink. Sadie won't let 'em in anymore, but they still try. Thanks for the warning. Us girls gotta look out for each other. Ain't nobody else gonna do it." That's becoming clear. In just a few days, you've seen how the women here rely on each other, sharing remedies for various ailments, warning about dangerous customers, lending clothes and cosmetics, covering for each other when someone needs a break. It's a strange sisterhood, born of necessity and shared experience. The saloon door bangs open, and a man in a suit walks in, clearly not a miner or cowboy. He has a badge pinned to his vest, the sheriff. "Morning, Sheriff Parker," Sadie calls from behind the bar, her voice sweet as honey. "Coffee?" "Not today, Sadie," he says, looking around the room with a disapproving frown. "Just making my rounds. Remind your girls to come in for their health checks tomorrow. Doc Wilson's orders." "Already on my calendar," Sadie assures him. "My girls are clean as whistles. You know that." The sheriff's eyes land on you, and you feel yourself shrink under his gaze. "New girl?" he asks Sadie, though he's still looking at you. "This is Martha, just arrived from back east, and yes, she'll be at the docks tomorrow with the rest." He tips his hat to you, but there's no warmth in the gesture. "Ma'am?" You nod back, not sure what to say. The whole exchange feels strange, like you're a piece of livestock being inspected. After he leaves, you turn to Maggie. "What was that about? Health checks?" "Sheriff makes us all see the doctor once a month," she explains, still scrubbing, checking for diseases and such. Town law. They fine Sadie if any of us miss it. And if someone has something, then they can't work till they're cleared. That's why Sadie's strict about men using rubbers. She nods toward a drawer behind the bar. Keeps 'em right there. French letters, she calls 'em. Costs the men extra, but it's that or no business. You feel a flush of relief at this news. You'd been worried about diseases. You'd heard stories about what happened to women in this profession. At least Sadie runs a careful establishment. The day progresses in a blur of men coming and going. Some are kind, some are rough, all are lonely in their way. You stop counting after the fifth, focusing instead on the money accumulating in the small pouch Sadie gave you. "Keep it close," she'd warned. "Men will steal it if they can. I take a 50% cut. That's for room and board and protection. The rest is yours." Protection. That became clear when a drunk cowboy got too rough with one of the girls and Sadie appeared with a shotgun, ending the situation instantly. The man left without argument and Sadie helped the girl, Daisy, clean up her split lip. "No man touches my girls without permission," she'd said firmly. "That's the rule." By midday, you're exhausted but have earned more money than you would in a week of honest work back east. That's the devil's bargain of this life. Good money for work that costs pieces of your soul. You're sitting at the bar, nursing a cup of coffee laced with whiskey. Sadie's recommendation for getting through the day when the door opens again. This time it's a woman who enters, dressed in a plain, practical dress, her hair pulled back severely, a Bible clutched in her hands. The saloon goes quiet. Everyone knows what's coming. "Mrs. Holcomb," Sadie says, her voice noticeably cooler. "What brings you to our establishment? Looking for your husband, perhaps?" Several of the men chuckle at this, but Mrs. Holcomb isn't amused. She draws herself up, looking down her nose at Sadie despite being several inches shorter. "I've come to speak to these poor, lost women," she announces, "to offer them a path to redemption before it's too late." Sadie sighs dramatically. "We've been through this, Evelyn. My girls aren't interested in your redemption. They're working women making an honest living." "Honest?" Mrs. Holcomb nearly chokes on the word. "There is nothing honest about selling one's virtue for money." You find yourself speaking before you can stop yourself. "And what would you have us do instead, ma'am? Work in your husband's mine for pennies a day until our lungs give out? Or marry one of these fine gentlemen who just as soon beat us as look at us?" The room goes even quieter. Mrs. Holcomb turns her stern gaze on you. "You're new," she observes. "Not yet completely corrupted. Come with me, child. The Ladies' Aid Society can find you respectable work." You almost laugh. "Doing what? Washing clothes for half what I make here? No thank you, ma'am." Her lips tighten to a thin line. Pride comes before a fall, young woman. "When you're ready to save your immortal soul, you know where to find me." And with that, she turns and marches out, her back rigid with disapproval. Sadie comes over and puts a hand on your shoulder. "Good for you, standing up to old Battle-Axe Holcomb, but watch yourself. Her husband owns half the town, including the bank. Don't make enemies you can't afford." You nod, suddenly aware that you may have spoken too freely. In a town this small, with everyone's fortunes tied to the mines and the men who own them, politics is a dangerous game. As the day wears on, you learn more about the complex social web of Silver Creek. The brothel, while officially scorned by respectable society, is central to the town's economy and social life. Men come not just for the obvious services, but for company, conversation, and a taste of civilization in the rough frontier. You watch Sadie navigate this complicated position with impressive skill, keeping the peace with the sheriff, managing difficult customers, protecting her girls while still running a profitable business. She's harsh at times, but fair, and in a world where women have few options and fewer rights, she's carved out a kingdom of sorts. By late afternoon, you've earned enough to take a break. Your body aches and your painted smile feels like it might crack your face. You retreat to your tiny room, washing up with water you heated on the stove downstairs. There's a small crack in the wall between your room and Molly's. Through it, you can hear her crying softly. You tap gently on the wall. "Molly, you all right?" The crying stops abruptly. "I'm fine," comes her muffled reply. "Just thinking about home." You understand. Every woman here has a story, a before life that led them to this place. Some are running from something, others running towards something. All are surviving the best way they know how. "Where's home?" you ask, settling on your bed, grateful to take weight off your feet. "Kansas," she says after a pause. "Farm country. Drought took our crops 3 years running. Pa couldn't pay the bank." Another pause. "You?" "Boston," you say. "Husband gambled away everything, then left." She makes a sound that might be a laugh. "Men. They make the messes. We clean 'em up. That we do. You agree, lying back on your thin mattress. Outside, the sun is starting to lower behind the mountains. Soon, the night shift will begin. Busier, rowdier, more profitable, but also more dangerous. You should sleep while you can, but your mind is too full. You think about Mrs. Holcomb and her judgment, about Sheriff Parker and his calculating gaze, about Joe with his gentle voice and rough hands, about how quickly your life has changed and how uncertain your future remains. In just one day in Silver Creek, you've made more money than you did in a week of honest work back east. But at what cost? And how long can you do this before it breaks something essential inside you? These questions follow you as you drift into an uneasy sleep, the sounds of the saloon beginning to swell below as night falls on the Wild West, a place where fortune and ruin walk hand in hand, and where women like you carve out survival one client at a time. Your last thought before sleep claims you is that your fancy feather bed back in Boston never felt as necessary as this thin straw mattress does now. The difference between comfort and survival as stark as the line between your old life and the new. The sound of breaking glass jolts you awake. Shouting follows, a man's voice, then Sadie's cutting through like a knife. You break it, you buy it, Mr. Rogers, that's imported crystal, and I'll be adding it to your tab. You blink at the grey light filtering through your window. Morning already, it feels like you just closed your eyes. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache, and your mouth tastes like you've been chewing on old pennies. The bed in your crib is still a shock every morning, narrow as a coffin, the mattress lumpy with straw poking through in spots, nothing like the featherbed you shared with Thomas back in Boston, though honestly, right now it feels like the most comfortable place in the world. Just 5 more minutes. A sharp knock on your door shatters that dream. Rise and shine, Martha breakfast in 10 minutes and Sadie wants to talk to all the girls. It's Maggie's voice, already moving down the hall to wake the others. You groan and push yourself upright. The tiny room spins for a moment. Too much whiskey in your coffee yesterday. Rookie mistake. You've got to learn to pace yourself or you'll end up like Lila, who drinks so much she can barely stand by evening. The floorboards are ice cold under your bare feet. Mid-October in the mountains is no joke. Winter's already breathing down your neck. You splash water on your face from the basin, wincing at the cold, and pull on your day dress, a simple brown cotton thing that's seen better days. No need for the fancy stuff until the evening crowd arrives. Downstairs, the saloon is in that strange, bleary state between the last stragglers of the night and the first customers of the day. A man sleeps with his head on one of the tables, snoring softly. The bartender, Jim, is sweeping up broken glass while Sadie tallies numbers in her ledger at the bar. "Morning, sunshine," Sadie says without looking up. "Sleep well?" "Like the dead," you mumble, making your way to the coffee pot on the stove. The rich smell is the only good thing about this hour. Sadie snorts. "You'll get used to the hours, or you won't last." She closes her ledger with a snap. Coffee's fresh. Maggie's making flapjacks in the kitchen. Eat up. Busy day ahead. The kitchen is a warm, steamy sanctuary at the back of the building. Maggie stands at the stove, expertly flipping flapjacks while chatting with 3 other girls already seated at the large wooden table. This is the heart of the house, where the women gather without men, where they can drop the act for a little while. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," says a tall blonde as you enter. "Rough night, new girl?" "Leave her be, Charlotte," Maggie says, sliding a plate of flapjacks onto the table. "We were all green once." Charlotte shrugs, but there's no real malice in her eyes. "Just saying, she looks like she got run over by the stagecoach." You pour yourself coffee from the pot on the stove and join them at the table. "Thanks for the compliment. Exactly the boost I needed this morning." That gets a laugh from the other girls. The redhead next to Charlotte introduces herself as Daisy, and the quiet brunette is Pearl. You've seen them around but haven't really talked yet. Don't mind Charlotte, Daisy says, passing you the molasses. She's just sore because Judge Wilson's wife caught him leaving here yesterday. Charlotte rolls her eyes. That man swore he'd leave her. Been promising for a year now. And you believed him? Pearl speaks for the first time, her voice surprisingly deep. Men will say anything between the sheets. Ain't that the truth? Maggie agrees, sitting down with her own plate. First rule of this business, honey. Don't believe a word they say, especially the sweet ones. You nod, pouring molasses over your flapjacks. The food here is surprisingly good. Maggie used to cook for a logging camp before she came to Silver Creek, and she keeps everyone well fed. So, where'd you come from, Martha? Daisy asks through a mouthful. Boston, you say after a moment's hesitation. No point lying to these women. They can spot a fake story a mile away. Fancy, Charlotte says. What brought you all the way out here? Man trouble, I'm guessing. Husband gambled away everything, then disappeared. The words come easier now, like you're talking about someone else's life. The women nod. They've heard this story before, or ones like it. Mine drank himself to death, Pearl offers quietly. Left me with 3 kids and a mountain of debt. Where are your children now? You ask, before you can stop yourself. Pearl's face clouds. With my sister in Denver. I send money when I can. She looks down at her plate. They think I'm a seamstress. An uncomfortable silence falls. You've touched on something painful, clearly, but before you can apologise, Sadie sweeps into the kitchen. Ladies, listen up. We've got a big day ahead. The mining company's paying out wages, which means the boys will be flush. I want this place spotless, and I want you all looking your best. She eyes each of you critically. Martha, you're with me after breakfast. Need to teach you a few things. After the last bite of flapjack, you follow Sadie upstairs to her private quarters at the end of the hall. Unlike the cramped cribs where you all sleep, her room is spacious and well furnished. A large 4-poster bed with actual sheets, a dressing table with a proper mirror, a small sitting area with 2 upholstered chairs, and a bookshelf filled with ledgers and a few novels. Sit, she orders, pointing to one of the chairs while she rummages in a cabinet. She returns with a wooden box which she sets on the small table between the chairs. First things first, she says, opening the box to reveal an array of small bottles, tins and packets. Protection. This business will kill you quick if you're not careful. She holds up a small rubber item. French letter. Make sure every man wears one. No exceptions, no matter what they offer to pay. Some will try to take it off when you're not looking, so check and don't let them turn you around so you can't see what they're doing. Next comes a tin of powder. Douche powder. Use it after every customer, no matter what. Mix with warm water. There's always some on the stove downstairs. A small brown bottle. Laudanum. For when the monthly pains come, or if you're having trouble sleeping. But be careful. Too many girls get too fond of it. I've seen it ruin more women than men ever did. Another bottle, smaller and darker. This is for emergencies only. If you think you might be in trouble, late. It'll take care of it, but it'll make you sick as a dog for a few days. Come to me first if you're worried. Don't try to handle it yourself. The business-like way she discusses these intimate matters makes them seem less frightening somehow. This is just another trade with its tools and techniques. Now, she continues, closing the box. Let's talk about the business side. You've got the basics down, 50% to me for room, board and protection. That's better than most houses. Some take 60 or even 70. You keep track of your own money. I suggest finding a good hiding place, not in your room where customers can find it. Where do you suggest, you ask? She smiles slightly. I keep a safe in my room. You can leave money with me if you want. I keep honest books. She taps one of the ledgers on her shelf. But some girls don't trust anyone. Up to you. You think about it. Sadie seems fair, if hard, and she clearly runs a tight ship. I'd like to use your safe, if that's all right. She nods, seemingly pleased with your decision. Smart girl. Now let's talk about classes of customers. You're new, so you'll get mostly the regular working men. Miners, cowboys, labourers. They're usually quick and not too complicated. As you build a reputation, you might get higher class clients, businessmen, mine owners, even the occasional government man passing through. She leans forward, her voice serious. The higher the class, the more particular they are, but they also pay better and sometimes give gifts. Treat them special, remember their names and what they like. That's how you build regulars. How much should I charge? It feels strange discussing the price of your body like it's a yard of fabric or a pound of flour. Standard rate for basics is $2 for working men, $5 for businessmen. Anything special or that takes longer, you charge more. Use your judgment, but don't undercut the other girls. We've got standards to maintain. The coldly practical nature of the conversation is almost a relief. This isn't about shame or sin or any of the things Mrs. Holcomb would preach about. It's just business. One more thing, Sadie says, her voice softening slightly. Find something else to think about when you're with them. A place you like, a happy memory, a plan for the future. Don't let this job get in here. She taps her temple. That's how girls end up broken. It's perhaps the kindest thing she's said to you so far, and you find yourself unexpectedly moved. Thank you, Sadie. She waves your thanks away, businesslike again. Just practical advice. Now let's talk about your appearance. You're pretty enough, but you need to learn how to enhance it properly. The next hour is a crash course in the art of the painted lady. How to apply rouge to make your cheeks glow without looking feverish. How to darken your lashes with burned cork mixed with petroleum jelly. How to outline your lips to make them look fuller. Men like a woman who looks healthy, Sadie explains as she demonstrates on your face. They get enough sickness and death in the mines. They come here for life and colour. When she's done, you barely recognise yourself in her mirror. The woman staring back looks worldly, confident, desirable. Nothing like the proper Boston shopkeeper's wife you were 6 months ago. There, Sadie says with satisfaction. Now you look the part. Remember what I showed you. First impressions matter in this business. Back in your room, you practice what Sadie taught you, trying to commit the techniques to memory. The makeup feels heavy and strange on your face, but you have to admit it's effective. Even in your plain day dress, you look like a different woman. A soft knock interrupts your practice. It's Pearl, the quiet brunette from breakfast. Sorry to bother you, she says, hovering in the doorway, but I thought you might want these. She holds out a pair of silk stockings, only slightly worn. Charlotte was going to throw them out, just a small tear at the top, see? Nothing that can't be mended. You take the stockings, touched by the gesture. Good silk stockings are expensive, a luxury you haven't been able to afford since Thomas left. Thank you, you say. That's very kind. Pearl shrugs, looking embarrassed. Us girls have to look out for each other. No one else will. She turns to go, then hesitates. Some of us play cards in the kitchen on Tuesday afternoons when it's slow. You should join us. I'd like that, you say, and mean it. After she leaves, you examine the stockings. The tear is indeed small, easily fixed with a few careful stitches. You've always been handy with a needle. Maybe that's a skill you could offer the other girls in exchange for their knowledge. The afternoon passes in a flurry of activity. The whole place is being cleaned from top to bottom in preparation for the evening rush. You're assigned to help Maggie wash all the glassware, while other girls sweep and mop and dust. Payday's always busy, Maggie explains as you dry a seemingly endless parade of glasses. Miners come in with their pockets full and looking to spend. Good money, but long hours. How many customers should I expect? You still have trouble saying the word. Like naming it makes it more real. Maggie considers this. On a regular night, maybe 5 or 6. On payday, could be double that. Don't worry, Sadie won't let anyone work you to death your first week. She's tough, but fair. As you work, Maggie fills you in on the unwritten rules and customs of the house. Who to avoid, the Barlow brothers if they manage to sneak in. A mine foreman named Tucker who likes to leave bruises. Any man who won't take off his boots. Who the good customers are. Judge Wilson despite his wife. Doc Harris, who sometimes treats the girls for free, a shy bookkeeper from the mining office who mostly just wants to talk. The best times to take breaks, between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, early morning before the night shift miners come in, where to hide extra money sewed into a mattress in a hollowed-out Bible under a loose floorboard. It's a masterclass in survival, delivered matter-of-factly between polishing glasses. One more thing, Maggie says, lowering her voice. If you ever need to get away, really away, there's a woman in Denver who helps girls start over. Name's Mrs. Robinson, runs a boarding house for respectable working women. She doesn't ask questions about your past. Sadie knows about her, sends girls there sometimes when they want out of the life. You absorb this information silently, an escape route if you need it. Good to know. Why are you telling me this? You ask, finally. Maggie's hands don't stop working as she answers. You've got that look, like you're just passing through, not settling in. Some girls are made for this life, mate. They take to it like ducks to water. Others, she shrugs, just thought you should know there are options. Before you can respond, the front door bangs open and a boisterous group of men enters. Miners just off shift, their faces still streaked with coal dust, ready to spend their newly acquired wages. Showtime, Maggie murmurs, drying her hands on her apron. Remember what Sadie taught you, and if you get overwhelmed, signal me or one of the other girls. We look out for each other here. The afternoon blurs into evening as more men arrive, filling the saloon with noise and smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. You circulate as Sadie instructed, smiling and chatting, accepting drinks that you secretly pour into the spittoon when no one's looking. It's overwhelming at first, the noise, the hands that seem to find their way to your waist or shoulders at every opportunity, the crude jokes and cruder propositions, but you find a rhythm eventually, a way to navigate the room that keeps you moving, never trapped in one spot for too long. You watch the other girls work, Charlotte with her brassy laugh and expert flirtation, Pearl quieter but with a mysterious air that seems to draw certain men like moths to flame, Daisy with her vivacious energy, always in motion. Each has developed her own persona, her own way of attracting customers. What's yours going to be? You're still figuring that out. For now, you lean on your Boston background, playing up the contrast between your proper speech and your current profession. Men seem to enjoy the novelty of it. A real society lady, one miner says appreciatively after you correct his grammar without thinking. Fancy that in a place like this. By midnight, you've taken 3 men upstairs to your crib room. The encounters are brief, transactional, impersonal. You follow Sadie's advice and let your mind drift elsewhere, to a peaceful day in the Boston Public Garden, to plans for saving enough money to leave, to the plot of the last novel you read before your life collapsed. It works, mostly. You're present enough to ensure the men follow the rules, to count your money afterward, to use the douche powder as instructed, but some essential part of you is elsewhere, protected. Between customers, you find moments to breathe, standing by the back door, letting the cold mountain air clear your head, sharing a quick cigarette with Daisy on the back steps, a cup of coffee in the kitchen with Maggie, who always seems to know when someone needs a break. It's during one of these moments that you overhear a conversation that catches your attention. Two men at a nearby table, better dressed than the miners, one older with a heavy gold watch chain across his vest, the other younger with the look of an educated Easterner. "The railroad's coming through. Mark my words," the older man is saying. 6 months, maybe less. And when it does, this town's going to explode. "And you've already bought up the land they'll need," the younger man says with admiration. "Brilliant, Mr. Holcomb." Holcomb, the name registers immediately. Mrs. Holcomb's husband, the man who owns half the town, according to Sadie. "Smart investing is about seeing the future before others do," Holcomb says smugly. "The mine's producing well, but it's the railroad that will make this town, and those who control the land control the future." You drift closer, pretending to clean an empty table. "What about the current businesses?" the young man asks. "Will they be affected?" Holcomb's laugh is short and dismissive. "Some will thrive, those that serve our purposes. Others..." His eyes drift around the saloon, lingering on the girls, on Sadie behind the bar. "Others may find that Silver Creek is becoming too respectable for their particular services." A chill runs through you. Is he planning to shut down the brothel? Where would you all go? What would happen to women like Pearl sending money to her children? Before you can hear more, Charlotte appears at your elbow. "Got a live one asking for you," she murmurs. "Table by the stairs. Looks like he can pay well." You reluctantly leave the conversation behind, filing the information away to think about later. For now, there's work to do. The man at the table is indeed well dressed. A travelling salesman, you guess from his polished appearance and sample case beside his chair. He introduces himself as Mr. Barrett, in town selling mining equipment. "Pleasure to meet you, Martha," he says, his smile revealing expensive dental work. "May I buy you a drink?" And so the dance begins again. But as you flirt and laugh and eventually lead him upstairs, your mind keeps returning to what you overheard. Change is coming to Silver Creek, the kind of change that might eliminate the only steady work available to women like you and your newfound sisters in this rough-edged town at the edge of civilization. You've barely begun to find your footing in this new world, and already it might be crumbling beneath you. Such is life in the Wild West, always uncertain, always balanced on the knife's edge between opportunity and ruin. As you close your door behind Mr. Barrett, you wonder what Sadie would say if you told her what you'd heard. Would she have a plan? Would she fight, or would she simply move on to the next boomtown, the next opportunity? And what would you do if forced to choose? Questions for tomorrow. For now, there's only the next customer, the next dollar, the next step in learning how to survive in a world far harsher than the one you left behind. 3 weeks in Silver Creek, and you're already developing routines. The unfamiliar has become familiar with alarming speed. You wake earlier now, before Maggie's knock. Your body's adjusting to the rhythm of brothel life. Sleep during the quiet afternoon hours, work from evening until dawn. The lumpy straw mattress no longer feels strange beneath you. The cold no longer shocks when your feet hit the bare floor each morning. Today, sunlight streams through your small window at an angle that tells you it's nearly noon. You've slept later than usual after a particularly busy night. Payday at the mine again, and the saloon was packed until the early hours. Your muscles protest as you sit up. 27 customers in one night, a record you're not eager to repeat. But the money was good. Your emergency fund is growing faster than you'd hoped. Another couple of months like this, and you might have enough to leave to start over somewhere else. Maybe California. You've heard San Francisco is booming. More opportunities for women there, even respectable ones. That thought carries you through your morning rituals, washing your face, brushing your hair, dressing in your day clothes. No need for makeup and fine dresses until evening. Daytime is for chores, meals, and the brief window of normalcy the women carve out for themselves between shifts. The saloon below is quiet when you descend the stairs. Jim the bartender nods as you pass, busy polishing glasses. The tables have been cleaned, the floor swept of last night's debris, cigarette butts, broken glass, the occasional lost coin that Sadie always finds before anyone else. In the kitchen, Maggie presides over a pot of something that smells heavenly. Stew, you realise, with real beef, a luxury Sadie allows after good nights. There she is, Maggie says with a smile. Thought you might sleep through dinner. Nearly did, you admit, pouring yourself coffee. Is that real beef? Sure is. Sadie's in a good mood. Last night was the best take in months. She stirs the pot. Said we earned a proper meal. Pearl and Daisy are already at the table, playing cards. Charlotte is notably absent, probably still sleeping after her own busy night. She had a line of customers waiting outside her door from dusk till dawn. Well, look who finally decided to join the living, Daisy teases. Rough night, Martha? 27, you say, collapsing into a chair with your coffee. Pearl whistles low. Damn, I only had 18. You're building quite the reputation. There's no judgment in her tone, just professional acknowledgement. In this upside-down world, your growing customer base is a kind of success, a validation of your worth in the only currency that matters here. Deal me in next hand? You ask, nodding at their cards. Sure thing, we're playing for hairpins. Pearl shows you her small pile of winnings. I'm cleaning Daisy out, only because I let you, Daisy retorts with a grin. These quiet afternoon moments have become your favourite part of life in Silver Creek. Just women together, no performance required, no men to please, just coffee and cards and Maggie's cooking and conversation that doesn't require painted smiles. The back door opens, letting in a blast of cold air and Sheriff Parker. He removes his hat as he enters, nodding to the women. Ladies, Maggie, that stew smells like heaven itself. Might be some extra if you've got news worth hearing, Maggie replies without missing a beat, their familiar exchange revealing a relationship more complex than you initially assumed. The sheriff chuckles, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. Caught one of the Barlow boys trying to sneak in through the back window last night. Got him locked up for attempted breaking and entering. Maggie ladles stew into a bowl and sets it on the table. Worth a bowl, I'd say. You watch this interaction with fascination. The relationship between law enforcement and the brothel is clearly more nuanced than you'd expected. There's an understanding here, an equilibrium maintained through mutual benefit. The sheriff sits, nodding thanks for the food. His eyes land on you. Miss Martha, settling in all right? Yes, sir. You reply, still unsure how to interact with him. Is he friend or foe, protector or threat? Good, good. Sadie runs a clean house. Follow her rules, you'll do fine. He takes a bite of stew, closing his eyes briefly in appreciation. Where's Miss Charlotte today? Still sleeping, Pearl answers. Busy night. The sheriff nods, unsurprised. I need to speak with Sadie. She around? Office, Maggie says, joining you at the table with her own bowl. Everything all right? Something passes across the sheriff's face. Concern, maybe. Just some news from county. Nothing for you ladies to worry about, but his tone suggests otherwise, and you exchange glances with Pearl. Something's happening.